Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast. On today's show, we have Ben Hadley. He's the VP of Strategy at Prodigy Software, one of the innovators in helping dealers create a modern retail experience. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
So, Ben, for dealers listening to the podcast and not familiar with Prodigy, give us a little thumbnail. When was the company started and what its primary mission is in the automotive industry?
Yeah, absolutely. About 3 years ago, the founders, they met and they had both had some success in the startup world already. They were looking at the automotive space and they realized this was right around the time of kind of BP, Vroom, and a few others in the space that were really starting to shake things up in the industry. And their stance after looking at everything was that a lot of these startups in automotive, specifically in digital retailing, were actually geared at taking away the dealership's business. So their hypothesis was something like, well, what if we just made really awesome technology that equipped dealers instead of bought dealers? And so that was really the core thought process that led to Prodigy. And it started really as an online digital retailing only suite. And then we kind of quickly evolved to what we do today.
Great. So there are many people who are trying to create a modern retail experience. We've talked about this many times on the podcast that other retail experiences outside of automotive have set the bar. I first heard of your company as I was talking with Southeast Toyota distributors. They've been one of the OEMs that have been testing in the field different digital retailing tools. And I heard a lot of high praise for your software. So for dealers who are trying to figure out which platform might be best for them, what advice or insights would you give about how your approach might fit within a specific dealer's culture?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There is a lot of emphasis right now on digital retailing from a marketing standpoint. It is a highly marketable item, so it kind of makes sense that we've all kind of drawn ourselves to it and thought about how can we make TV commercials about it? How can we talk about it? How can we teach the new consumer this new beautiful way to buy a car? I don't think there's enough talk about the operational side of things. And so what I would really recommend any dealership to start investigating is how many users are actually engaging and having a digital retailing experience out of your total sales per month. And use that as a mechanism to give yourself an idea of, are you really moving the needle in the digital retailing world? Or are we really just kind of squishing together some forms that we usually have on our website anyways and making it just more convenient there? I think that's a huge one.
So Ben, if I'm hearing you properly, we know that today, at least from my interviews, maybe 5% of the people who start a digital retailing workflow actually complete it. And I'm not hearing any more than 10% of total sales are being done through a digital retailing tool, meaning the trade, the finance application and such. So are you saying that the better approach is to focus where 100% or near 100% of the people live, and that's in the showroom?
Yeah, that's really our stance on the issue. For comparison, our average is about 83% of sales engage with our digital retailing platform. And that is mostly because we take an in-store first approach. It's not that we completely ignore the online part. We want to be where the customer wants to shop. But what we haven't seen so far is that the tides have turned where the customer is overwhelmingly wanting to shop solely online and doesn't want to end up coming in to check a color, check a trim, ask a question, smell the inside of the vehicle. So generally speaking, most customers are still going to walk in. And the way I kind of summarize that is that I think as I've progressed through automotive in the last 9 years. I've really seen auto move from behind the times in terms of digital. And then when you look at a dealer's website today, I would argue that they are up amongst with the best of them. I'd say they're mostly 2018, 2019 customer-facing dealership websites. But all of that story really changes once you enter the store. All of a sudden, we time travel back to 1997 when we get in the store.
So I like that, Ben, the time travel. Isn't it true? Most websites are mobile responsive. They have 50 plus photos. You can search by trim, color, miles per gallon. Some websites allow you to shop by payment. Yet, no matter how much work is being done online, sales associates are almost mandated or forced to do that traditional road to sale and really not assess how much has been done already online. And we could, if we were honest, basically say that most sales process don't respect the time that consumers invest online. What do you think about that statement?
I love it. I love it for this reason. There's kind of a core principle of life: do unto others as you would do to yourself, right? So here's this customer. And in the best case scenario, in that 5 to 10% engagement of digital retailing scenario, they are taking time out of their day to do a trade-in. They're taking time out of their day to do a finance app. That might be a lot of time. They might be taking time out of their day to research different F&I options, warranties, etc. And as they're adding up that stopwatch of time, they may, at the end of a regular, complete digital retailing process, have spent 45 minutes to an hour just doing all of the steps now online at their convenience rather than in store. But what that does is that sets the bar up really high for the in-store experience. So if they walk in the store and, the car isn't waiting for them to test drive, right? Nobody knows that person's name. Nobody has an idea of all of that effort that the customers put in. The dealership hasn't put an equal amount of effort, or at least looked like they put an equal amount of effort back, been reciprocal to them. I think that's where we're really seeing digital retailing fail.
Yes, and it's not uncommon as I talk to dealers who are working with tools that were primarily designed for the online experience, where they may not have a check-in application, they may not have a cart where a consumer saves their information, so when the consumer comes in, it can easily be logged up. But one of the problems, and Ben, I'd like to hear it from you as well, is, the consumer does some work online, could be very robust in the amount of data that is generated, and yet it gets jammed down into an old ADF lead form record that goes into a CRM that doesn't have all the data fields for digital retailing. And yet we're trying to ask dealers to very easily pick up where the consumer left off online. What I see is that the integration of data is another big challenge to create this seamless experience when they arrive.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think there has been talks, even led by you, about replacing ADF XML and really upgrading that. I really think that is something that needs to happen to make it all easier for the whole industry to progress. Until that date, until that becomes widely adopted, right now, I think one of our biggest differentiators is our ability to start a sale, give you a synopsis of how much effort has been taken by that customer in the sale. What are all the steps they've done, regardless of whether it's on our platform or anybody else's, and really pick up right where that customer left off and give them a fluid experience.
So let's break that down a little bit. So when a dealer's thinking of where Prodigy Software fits in to the digital retailing ecosystem, you're providing a software platform that does desking or integrates with their desking. Is it a tablet-based system? Is it a kiosk-based? Let's talk about the in-store experience. When you help a dealer transform what they're doing in the store, what hardware is required? What tools are you providing that may replace existing tools? Give us a rundown on that.
Yeah, so think about the transformation that AT&T and Verizon really went through. They have to deal with these kind of terminal-based point of sale systems that have been legacy, similar to how we have to deal with a lot of terminal-based DMS systems, even though we're starting to migrate a lot of those to the cloud today. And so what we've developed is essentially an iPad that integrates not just with all of the information coming from the website, but actually has an API, push-pull API to every major CRM, integrates with API to Viata, integrates with API to DealerTrack, to Cuddle, to Route1, has desking built into it. So we're not interrupting any of the core systems that currently exist in a dealership's world, but we are enhancing all of those by integrating them into one platform.
Well, that makes sense to me because without an API, you really can't have robust conversations with your lending partners, get real-time rates or approvals. Let's talk about the communication, though. Say I'm a sales associate, a customer comes in, I'm working on my deal, I'm working everything through the tablet, but a sales associate in most dealerships don't have the authority to approve a deal. Does the Prodigy platform have messaging so that the salesperson can communicate with the desk in real time to keep things flowing? And if not, how is it done?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the coolest features of our platform is that the manager dashboard, where all of the desking, all of the quotes, the first pencil, et cetera, go through it, also acts as a way to notify sales management that they need to do something. I'll give you an example with one of the recent features we just created, which was an incognito tee up. So you can imagine you have a customer in your building, you've walked them through half of the process, they've brought their trade, they're really interested in this one car, and they want to walk across the street just for a little while to the Applebee's. There always seems to be an Applebee's close by to a dealership, and sit down and maybe talk to their spouse and just confirm, hey, this is the purchase I'm about to make. Before all of that happens, you actually can go into our iPad as a sales associate and send a text message and a notification to that sales manager on the desktop that has a summary of the vehicle they're interested in, all of the different steps that they've taken so far. If there's a relevant pencil, it'll show the payment that they're at, and it'll also show how much of their credit availability. So basically giving that sales manager an immediate synopsis of that customer so they can speak to the customer before they leave and try to keep them within the store and close a deal. I think what we see is that, there's a pretty famous statistic out that we always seem to talk about. It changes between 1.2 and 1.6, but the customers are really aiming to never go to more than 2, really, but 1.2 or 1.6 dealerships prior to buying a car, right? A good friend of mine, Darren Haygood, used to say they're only going to those 0.2 or those 0.6 because that dealership messed it up. And I think what we're looking at is a consumer base that want to see the salesperson mess something up. I don't know if you've ever been to a Home Depot or even for me, a Best Buy. I am a tech nerd, right? So I'll go in and I will slyly wait for someone to approach me and ask me, hey, can I help you? And if it's on an Android device, I am going to play Stump the Dummy with that guy just for fun. I think the amount of research and information available to customers today online, most of them, whether they know it or not, are playing Stump the Dummy with sales associates. And so the iPad is also really equipped to have all relevant information about the vehicle on hand. So you're not running around looking for a sales manager or a pamphlet to answer a question about trim level. You have it right in front of you. So you're always the expert.
And, I can resonate with that, message because I recently purchased a car and I called my good friend Andy Wright from Vinart about a Honda financing. I also verified some other details with Tom Moore at the Morgan Auto Group. So when I called the local dealer, I asked a question that I already knew the answer to just to kind of test their, transparency. Yeah. And I said, look, I'm going to finance the car. I'm going to finance it for 3 years. I'm going to put $10,000 down. And what's the rate? And to the salesperson's credit, they were like, well, I normally don't, handle the financing questions. That's normally done with our financing manager. But if I'm not in error. I think it's 0.9 for 3 years, 1.9 for 5, which is the truth. That's what it was. And I was like, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That they were being
Check the box.
straightforward. Yeah, they checked the box. So when we talk about an in-store process, I am fascinated as I'm doing research on my next book, which is about a blueprint for taking a dealer with a traditional showroom experience or sales process and creating a modern retail experience. Does the Prodigy app benchmark time between major steps? Because I'm fascinated to see the time variation from somebody who does most of the work online and comes in versus someone who's done none of the work online and comes in. Ben, what can you tell me about any reporting that exists today, or maybe just respond to my thought process? How do we document the true benefits of an integrated, seamless, collaborative approach to selling as compared to the way we've been selling for 50 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of our largest stores, and really our sweet spot tends to be the modern, progressive, not necessarily high volume, but busy on a Saturday store. It can be deceiving when we're trying to figure out the time savings that we're getting. We do estimate time savings to customers to incentivize them to complete more and more steps. Hey, save 45 minutes by doing the credit app, or, it would be awesome if you sent in your license and proof of insurance prior to showing up, because that'll save you another half hour. So we do have that as a customer-facing piece. But in terms of actual measurement, because we're hitting about 83% on average of a person's sales, we really can't necessarily compare ourselves to the 27%. Because oftentimes the remaining 7% that are not using Prodigy are very complicated, super off the wall, very complex sales in the first place. And there's a reason that they didn't kind of qualify to go through our streamlined process. So to use that as a kind of corresponding or a relative sample, I think would be a mistake. But I can tell you that we have seen a car get sold through our platform in under 45 minutes.
And is that when we're talking about the time, someone walking in, going through, picking, going, financing, out the door?
That is a walk-in. Didn't do anything online. And that, to me, is the most common customer today.
Yeah, listen, I was in and out in 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I probably would have been out in an hour if, the way in which the dealer's insurance team, was kind of a little backed up, waiting to call the insurance company to move over the car on my policy. But I was very clear, and I was very pleased with the dealership's process. I just did a lot of the heavy lifting online, so everything was queued up by the time I got there.
Yeah, so one of the major components to our process that saves a lot of time is taking the philosophy that I think a lot of other digital retailing platforms are doing online, which is avoiding redundant entry of data and taking that same thought process in store. So for example, once you scan a license with us, all of that information pre-populates into every deal pack that you have. It also pre-populates into the finance app. So once we've captured first name, last name, and address, anything, we are figuring out all the other applicable fields where that information can go just to continue saving time. So our methodology of trying to be as efficient as possible is really based around saving a minute here, a minute here, a minute here, a minute here, continuously, so that at the end of the sale, you've really saved a cumulative hour.
Got it. So Ben, one of the things that is a little confusing for dealers, because there are different positions on this, is whether or not a digital retailing platform needs DMS integration. And I've heard some people say, well, of course you need DMS integration because, that's where the deal eventually resides. And others say, no, we integrate with DealerTrack, and DealerTrack would push the deal into the DMS, or, we integrate with this tool or this transport. So when you mention you have your own desking tool, are you having bi-directional communication with a DMS? Are you getting to or writing back and forth to the DMS. Let's talk about that because everyone has a slightly different approach.
Yeah, that is probably the number one thing on our roadmap right now is integration with the DMS. Right this moment, today, our core customers, they use Route 1 or DealerTrack or both, and then push from there into the DMS. But again, in trying to be as efficient as possible, we've really focused that efficiency on the customer experience in terms of double entry. We want to reciprocate that to the salesperson's experience.
Right.
In the sales management team's experience. So we actually think DMS integration makes a lot of sense to gear ourselves towards. And I would say give us a very short period of time and you'll see it from us.
Great. I appreciate that insight. Now let's talk about the online experience. Some companies are taking the approach that a consumer really can't pencil their own deal online. They need help. And so they have integrated chat or communication products. Others say, no, we make it very simple. People know how to pick, payment, down payment. They know how to pick, insurance products and such. What's your stance on the current tool set that you offer to plug in on a dealer's website?
I think part of our stance really goes back to why we focus on the in-store and how important we think operations are. So when we integrate with a website, we use one single button currently, and we take that, essentially, we take the number one converting button on the dealership's website today and then modify it so it looks native to the website, but it's actually our digital retailing platform. When you click into that button, it is just your basic form, first name, last name, email address. Because our system adapts with any lead that it's getting from the CRM on that push-pull API, our vision is really to incentivize lead volume, not necessarily incentivize the amount of steps and incentivize full completion of digital retailing every single time. And so digital retailing almost then becomes optional once you've advanced past that first name, last name, email address form. After that screen, it will say, hey, you could save a lot of time in the store if you complete some more steps. We are trying to incentivize them a little, but we don't want to make it a requirement to advance. I think it's really interesting, the idea of bringing chat into the mix, mainly because VDPs to me have almost become button vomit. Right?
Yeah. I love that. I might have to use that button vomit.
You can steal it. It's literally, we've gotten overboard. And it reminds me of the days where we used to have this idea of a lot of micro websites for quote unquote SEO purposes.
Right.
So the dealer would essentially be competing with themselves. And the thought process was, well, if I only compete with myself, I win every time. But of course, the other thought process is, yeah, but you're also losing every time. And the way you're losing is through a really, really awful customer user experience. And so with every button, I think it's pretty paramount to have an expectation that's correct about what that button does. And I mean that really what that should reflect ideally is the brand's promise. So this is where we get into a lot of trouble with digital retailing, is if the promise is the best price, or the promise is speed, right? And it's an express buy, or the promise is, whatever. But then when you show up in store and you're not fast, or you show up in store and the price is totally different, that breeds mistrust. And that doesn't also back that brand promise. That doesn't propagate the brand at all. And so really, I think that's why we think the two go hand in hand, is because one, we're trying to remain as flexible as possible to current practices within the dealership, but then we can kind of grow and advance with the dealership as they do too.
Makes sense. Now, when dealers consider a more collaborative in-store experience with a tablet, coaching the sales associates to work side by side with a customer, what percentage of your customers today are allowing the sales associate to go all the way through kind of a cradle to grave showroom experience, including F&I, versus at some point the sales associate walks over and drops them off in the F&I office?
Oh, I would say less than 25% allow a full with F&I experience. I think F&I is still really important, but I also think that sales up until this point hasn't done the best job of setting that F&I office up for success. So we include F&I in the tablet process in our quote unquote road to the sale, so that, and as well as online, so that the expectation is set as early as possible in the consumer's head that your buying process isn't necessarily done yet. A lot of consumers are starting to look at the watch on that transition from sales to F&I, right? So they're looking at, holy crap, I've been here for X amount of time.
Right.
At that moment, because the rest of the time is actually pretty fun. You're test driving, you're talking with someone, maybe they're grabbing you a coffee while you wait for something. There's a lot of pieces to the car buying process that are actually pretty enjoyable. It's that one moment where F&I is backed up, or you have to wait and you're meeting this new stranger and you didn't realize that there was more to buy. That's where things start getting uncomfortable. So we really want to set that side up for success. And we do have some dealers that let it go cradle to grave all the way. But for the most part, the majority of our dealers are still thinking in terms of what the kind of current basic process is, and we're adhering to that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems with dealers who still keep the traditional box set up is on a busy Saturday, they could have had the best experience with a sales associate, very collaborative, side by side. But if they're still waiting an hour to get into the F&I office, then all of that kind of blows up. So I think long term, the F&I office and the most of the activity that was in the F&I office is going to happen on the showroom floor with a sales associate. It's going to take a lot more training. I think of the Champ Automotive Group, where they train up to 2 months before they put someone on the floor, but then they're cradle to grave. They don't hire automotive retreads. They hire people who have great customer service skills, great communication skills, love to talk and be with people. They teach them the rest. But they have eliminated millions of dollars a year in salaries because the traditional F&I office is no longer there, and their PVR hasn't gone down at all.
Yeah, I think it is the future. You know, I think it's sometimes a mistake to say or compare ourselves to Amazon. I think that is an apples to oranges comparison. But I will say, the one thing Amazon nails, other than calling it logistics, is delivery, right? They really get out of your way to let you get where you're going. And I think you're hitting on something really keen here, which is that is a big hurdle, right? That is kind of a big blocker for us as an industry, is that we do get on our own way. One way we kind of try to overcome that is by actually handing the iPad over to the customer while they're waiting, so that they can explore F&I options while they're waiting. And that I don't consider cradle to grave, because there still is that handoff process. But at least it mitigates that wait time, so the consumer feels like they're still actively participating in the sales process.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely a critical piece of this evolution to a modern retail experience. Obviously, the showroom design has to change. Get rid of the desks, stop putting objects between the customer and the sales associate, having cars ready and waiting when appointments are there, streamlining, obviously, the prep process. You know, one of the funny things is it's still, once a car is selected, still has to be cleaned and prepped, on a busy Saturday. That's another area where, hey, you've done everything. Now you're waiting a half hour for it to come out of detailing. By the time that car comes out, you're ready to scream and get, out of the dealership. So there's a lot of opportunities in the months and years ahead to create this modern retail experience. Ben, when dealers look at the human training piece, since I agree with you, the first thing that they should fix is the showroom process. That's the first thing, because that's the hardest. That's where culture changes. That's where training is needed. That's where old habits have to be broken. Say somebody has great leadership at the top and they want to commit to a more modern retail experience. How long does it take for a dealer to really lean in on and use effectively the Prodigy system, with a staff that may have tenure from 1 month to 25 years?
Yeah, we have a group in North Carolina that is on board with us. And after 3 months with our product, they were already at 96% of their sales going through Prodigy.
Wow.
Now, the way that we're so fast at accomplishing that is that we've given sales managers the ability to really control the sales process, meaning that we can lock down portions of the iPad so you do not pass go, for instance, if you have not done a test drive. Like one of the largest things we press on from an operational side of the business is making sure that we mark test drives in CRMs. And it's one of the things that we also are kind of collectively bad at doing is using the actual CRM. So what we've done, for example, is made it so that when the iPad senses that the GPS of it has gone over 20 miles per hour for longer than 2 minutes, it pushes into the CRM, says, listen, this customer that's looking at this vehicle test drove that vehicle. We can also make it, though, so that you cannot even engage with that test drive unless a license has been scanned. Or, for example, you cannot engage with the finance app unless a test drive is done. So we can basically look at your sales associates, find the ones that are really kicking butt, measure what they're doing right, and then use that as an outline so that we can have everybody adhere to those same processes and steps.
I love that. Unless somebody can run, 20 miles an hour, I think that's a pretty foolproof system.
Yeah, 100%. You can change that. That's a rule-based system. So you could change if you did have someone really fast in your team.
Okay.
You can change that requirement if you want.
I love it. Well, Ben, I'm really glad that we had a chance to have you on the show today. Dealers are really hungry to create a better experience. They want to. They're just afraid. They need help changing attitudes. They need assistance and a clear blueprint on how to train and evolve. It looks like that you and your team are doing a wonderful job. I've heard great things from the field, which is most important to me, that dealers really love the tool. If a dealer who's watching today's show, or maybe an OEM who's on their digital retailing task force, what's the best web address and phone number that they could contact and get some information about the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is www.getprodigy.com, www.getprodigy.com. And I will give out my cell phone, as scary as that could be. It is 802-735-2282. And I will talk to you, help you. If you just want to call and ask my advice, I'm happy to help.
Great. Ben, well, thank you so much for being transparent and allowing us to have our listeners contact you. I encourage dealers to learn more about the Prodigy software platform to create a modern retail experience. If this is the first time you're listening to one of our podcasts, this is one in a series of 20 interviews with thought leaders and technology companies that are working to create a modern retail experience for dealers. We also call it digital retailing. So we started this series in April. We'll be going all the way through till July. So make sure that you listen to the other podcasts in this series. We also look forward to hosting you at a future podcast. We release podcasts every Monday. So make sure you check back and look at the schedule, or go back and look at some of the past episodes. Every Monday, there's a fresh new conversation that is driving improvements and innovation in the automotive industry. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast, and I look forward to sharing time with you again in the near future.